Mr. President, the world today faces the simultaneous consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Great Lockdowns, the Great Depression 2020, and accelerating extreme inequality, as well as the arms race of the 21st century. Recovery from the Great Depression requires a rekindling of hope and of confidence in the future. As I argue in my book Equilibra, our culture and institutions are based on the values that are our common humanity. This is the basis of conscious-driven activities. With conscious-driven education effectively reaching the young minds, meeting and maintaining the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals could be easier, given that a good education, especially conscious-driven, strengthens societies, communities, and entire countries. Stronger communities are fertile land for development, and of adding educated communities will make the efforts sustainable in the future, given that the individuals have a better understanding on how they affect Mother Earth and their actions that can produce sustainable development for their communities. One thing that needs to be done is to commit ourselves to building a net zero emission society by 2050 as an official goal of the international community. We are hopeful that this can be achieved in COP26 in Glasgow in November of 2021. We also need methods of emergency self-executing financing, such as ceasing and desisting from coercive, unilateral, and illegal measures that have effect in 39 countries with more than 2 billion inhabitants. The application of such measures in times of pandemic elevates the illegality to the level of crimes against humanity. I would also like to point out that the 21st century arms race is a possible source of funding. Since military spending in 2019 was $1.9 trillion, the largest amount since the first Cold War, and the largest year-on-year increase in a decade. If only 20% of that spending is reduced and reallocated in education and climate change, there would be $380 billion per year that could be available for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, including the health goals related to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as climate finance. We can either continue to prepare for the third Cold War, which will be the end of humanity, or begin to use our own resources for the achievement of our collective Sustainable Development Goals for the benefit of our progeny. In Nicaragua, for example, in 2007, the first measure undertaken by President Comandante Daniel Ortega Saavedra was a redistributive one, which was the restitution of the constitutional right to universal, free health and education, which had been curtailed during the 16 years of neoliberal governments, 1990 to 2006. This represents savings of around $845 a year for a family of 5, compared to the cost recovery applied by previous governments. These policies influence directly the reduction of poverty from 48.3% of the population in 2007 to 24.9% 9 years later, and extreme poverty from 17.2% to 6.9%. This occurred due to redistributive policies, the capitalization of the poor through the zero hunger and zero usury programs, investment in public goods, especially education, health, and infrastructure, facilitating the inclusion of historically excluded groups. Mr. President, the programs such as Zero Hunger led to the capitalization of poor female rural women, and the program Zero Usury contributed to entrepreneurship with microcredits at 5% per annum for urban women. Both of these permitted Nicaragua, as well as the political inclusion, to go from 90th in the index of the gender gap of the World Economic Forum of Davos, 90th in 2007 to 5th in 2019. A world-class advance which makes Nicaragua the country that most reduced the gender gap of all of the countries in the world, save Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, as well as of all the developing countries and all of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. If this can be done in the second poorest country in the region, it can certainly be done in other countries as well. Thank you, Mr. President.